Recently, DICE have really kicked Battlefield 1 into a new gear. We've just had the winter update drop with plenty of new progression items to keep us happy for a little while longer, the promise of even more of that coming in the future, the They Shall Not Pass DLC that's dropping in a few weeks in March, and now even more news that DICE are looking to improve existing aspects of the game. Now, having spoken to one of the devs at DICE LA last week, it's very clear that the team are fully aware of the community's top concerns with the game, and they are determined to work to address them. Now, they're starting with perhaps the map that still causes the most infuriating of matches, Suez on Conquest. Now, you might remember that when Battlefield 1 released, Suez was actually only a 3-flag Conquest map, and DICE worked very quickly to change it to a 5-flag layout after a huge outcry of opinion that the map in that layout did not work correctly, with 64-player Conquest just turning into 64-man domination. The 3 flags were located around the central town, and a triple cap of all the flags ended the game just far too quickly. It gave neither team any room to really flank around, and essentially it created a wall of players fighting over a few buildings within the centre of that town. Now, the 5-flag layout you can play today is much better than it was before, but it's still far from perfect. That is what DICE are looking to improve on. Now, last week, Jorge Dalund, I think that's how you say his name, a DICE LA developer working on Battlefield 1, also known as Indigold by the way, he posted a thread on the Battlefield 1 CTE Reddit page asking for community feedback and suggestions on how to make Suez better. As many of you know, Suez tends to be a bit one-sided in Conquest at the moment, where one team will dominate the other with little chance of a comeback. We want to change this, and we want your help. We are mainly looking at ways of changing the layout and positioning of the flags, as well as adding and removing vehicles. If you have any suggestions as to what you would like to see us do with Suez, specifically in Conquest, please let us know. Drawings are great, even if done in paint. We hopefully can collect and playtest several different layouts, both in-house and on the CTE. This is your chance to influence the future of Suez. Keep that creativity flowing. To give you some context as to why DICE are focusing on changing the layout and changing the position of flags here, let me flash up a top-level view of Suez. See, all of the conquest points are chained into one big line? Yeah, the linearity of this map is what causes most of its problems. The majority of Battlefield 1's maps are linear in their design, and the last game to adopt that sort of style, so predominantly I think, was Battlefield Bad Company 2. That game focused on smaller player numbers, 16 versus 16 on PC and 12v12 on the consoles, and the main game mode was Rush, which suits that linear format. Here in Battlefield 1, I'm not 100% sure which of the modes DICE actually picked as their lead game mode. Maybe it was Operations, considering how most of those maps have some linearity to them, and at least some space for flanking around the sides. But here on Suez, flanking doesn't always go down that well. For sure, you've got the space to flank. I mean, up to the north, you've got the canal and the train tracks, lots of open space down there. And then to the south, you've got the sand dunes, which connects to the massive desert beyond that. But both of these areas are extremely open, long lines of sight, and virtually no cover to allow a flank to develop properly. 1 or 2 players might be able to get themselves through, and sometimes you can see that on the respawn screen. There's one little player who's managed to make his way all the way down to the other end of the map, but you can't get a few players through there, or else you'll just be spotted by the enemy. Now, the community on Reddit has been hard at work suggesting changes and improvements that could be made. I'm going to flash up a few of their ideas here, highlight some of the ones that I think have some good merits to them, but I think all of them have strengths and weaknesses, just like most designs do, and I do think there is one that I prefer over the other, but I don't really think it's ever going to happen, but I'm going to showcase it anyway, because I think it's a cool idea. Now this first idea is likely the most basic of the ones that I've picked, and I don't mean that in a bad way, because sometimes making small changes overall can have a big effect, and this design definitely gets rid of that linearity that we see on Suez currently. It utilises a lot more of what I would consider the wasted space on Suez, just the massive expanses of sand that stretch out, that lead nowhere and end up just going to out of bounds. It's broken up that linearity, as I said, and it also connects in the train tracks a hell of a lot more than the current design does. Right now on Suez, the train tracks and the behemoth that rolls in on them doesn't ultimately come into contact with any of the flags like it does on other maps. On Sinai, for example, you can cap the gimme flag near the British deployment, the gimme flag for the Ottomans, and the central train station, the D flag as well. You can employ that same method here on Suez by stretching a couple of the points out of the line and build them around the train track. Not only would that add a bit more variety to the gameplay, having to think about the train actually coming into contact with infantry, but it would also create the scenario that the behemoths were added to the game for. They'd be able to turn the tide of the battle by having direct influence on the score by capturing the conquest flags. The next design that I've got here, I'd like to highlight it because it doesn't manipulate what DICE have on Suez already, but I think it just simply adds to it. It changes Suez from an infantry-focused map with 5 linear flags into essentially an all-out warfare map where ground vehicles could have a greater influence. You can see the addition of 2 extra flags to bolster the areas of combat, bringing it up to a total of 7, and it brings into play an area beyond the train track towards the Ottoman spawn, but it keeps hold of the heavily focused infantry flag in the town, labelled C. Now this layout makes sense to keep the combat moving all the time, because you've got different capture points to always try and keep control of, but I think it's likely to be exploited if the behemoth was to spawn in. 5 of the flags are currently within touching distance of the tracks, and there's a lot of empty space open to the south up by the larger dunes. Perhaps if you were to move flags D and F back from the tracks a little bit, F sitting more towards the dunes and D remaining a little bit closer, and then perhaps shuffling the C flag a little bit further into the centre of the map, you'd create some more balanced gameplay maybe. It's a nice idea, however, and it definitely utilises more of that available space. Another design I really like, and personally one that I'd love to see DICE work towards, is one that introduces the canal as part of the gameplay loop, and that introduces some vehicle warfare that we wouldn't normally see on a desert-based map. Now, pretty much this is a total redesign. It doesn't use the current layout that Suez has, and introduces far more of the map than pretty much the other two do. But you'd end up with 2 flags north of the canal, both on the British side, 1 central flag, which is the grounded dreadnought in the middle, and then 2 further flags south of the canal, which would sit on the Ottoman land. This design could really take advantage of some of the cool assets that are already built into the current map that we have for Suez, and offer something completely different to all of the other maps in the game. I wouldn't say we really have a river-based map in Battlefield 1 right now. I mean, on Foul Fortress you can get close with some of the boats and go down those little intertwining rivers around the 2 islands, but really it's not like direct river combat. And I think that could be really, really cool here, because it splits the gameplay right down the middle. Unfortunately, however, it seems that DICE won't be going down the route of a full redesign. A lot of the developers have been mentioning on social media and on Reddit that we're looking at more minor changes specifically focused around these flag locations and other elements of the map, as opposed to a complete redesign of Suez. To be honest, I think any of the changes that I've mentioned will improve Suez. All DICE need to do is get rid of that linear flag setup first of all, and I think they will already have improved the map tenfold. What I'd like to see them do is maybe add some cover down the 2 major flanks either side of the map, and allow the behemoth to have an effect on the gameplay. Move at least one of the capture points to the side of the tracks. That way it can get involved in the combat. If you have any suggestions about how DICE could improve this map, I've left a link down below in the description to the Reddit post so that you can give direct feedback to the developers, get yourself involved, and you could be instrumental to this decision. Thanks very much for watching. Let me know your thoughts on Suez down below in the comments, and while you're down there, drop me a like as well. It is always appreciated. You guys are awesome, and until next time, my name is Westie, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.